Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's Equity at Work webinar. My name is Bernard Sims, Director of Culture and Community here at Associated Black Charities, filling in for our President and CEO, Chrissy Thornton, and I will be your moderator for today's topic. Today's topic is redesigning workplace policies for Black success, and we are excited to have with us two dynamic panelists, Dr. Shanette Grant and Jalen Sanders. Just to give some overview and context, When we talk about redesigning workplace policies for Black success, we realize that many workplace policies were not designed with Black employees in mind, and even well-intentioned practices can reinforce inequities. And while organizations often focus on diversity initiatives and underlying systems and policies that govern hiring, promotion, discipline, and wellness, it frequently perpetuates the various barriers that they claim to address. In this Equity at Work session, we will center on the experiences of Black professionals to examine how organizational policies can either perpetuate harm or drive meaningful equity. We'll unpack the hidden biases embedded in standard practices and explore how progressive leaders are redesigning policies to dismantle systemic barriers, close opportunity gaps, and build workplaces where Black people are truly seen, supported, and empowered to thrive. We'll spotlight initiative policy frameworks and practical strategies that organizations can implement immediately to create lasting change. More than a conversation, this session is a blueprint for action for leaders ready to move beyond performative gestures and into substantive policies that will reform and transform workplace culture. So don't miss the opportunity to learn from these change makers who are rewriting the rules and creating workplaces that everyone should adhere to. So I'd ask for our panelists to come on camera. Please introduce yourself and share what redesigning workplace policies for Black success means to you and why this conversation is so essential for truly creating equitable workplaces. Dr. Grant, Jalen, please come on camera.
Thank you, Bernard. I'm assuming I'm going first, right, Jalen? Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Shrinette Grant, and I'm just so delighted to be a part of this conversation. You got a little bit of my bio in the previews, but I just want to share that as someone who really specializing in strategizing around effective leadership, my main mission is really to help leaders grow agile skills and to help organizations, grow and thrive and lead with impact. I do this through a couple of different ways. Under Unorthodox Leadership Coaching, Consulting, and Management Services. I deliver this work through organizational consulting, training and development, and also through executive coaching. Because as I'm sure will emerge even from this conversation, we will come to realize that the notion that sustainable and transformative change does not happen just by inspiration. It happens when we create structures, when we create alignment, and when we, exercise bold leadership. So for me, as a former C-suite executive, school and district administrator, nonprofit leader, and of course, founder of Unorthodox Leadership Consulting, and someone who has not only just led in these positions, but have been in these systems rather, but have also been impacted by them and worked to redesign them from the inside out. This conversation about redesigning workplace policies for Black success is especially meaningful to me because it's important that we move beyond surface level conversations about diversity and really start to look at policy and really challenge this idea that success is equivalent to our proximity to whiteness, right? So I'm very excited about sort of going through this conversation today and, participating and joining with Jalen to really speak truth about some of the things that as Black people, we really deal with in our workplaces. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Jalen?
Thank you for the wonderful opening, Dr. Grant. Again, my name is Jalen Sanders. Thank you for having me today as a part of this wonderful conversation. Similar to Dr. Grant, I've had an extensive tenure in both state, private, and my own personal business sectors when it comes to mentorship, youth leadership, civic engagement, governmental affairs, policy, law, and regulatory analysis and feedback. One of the most important things about this conversation is that, again, echoing Dr. Grant's sentiments, is that we approach it from a more realistic standard, leaving the echo chamber of diversity and simply talking about how we need different minds in different environments, because different minds in different environments, we all have different backgrounds as well. So once we get below the surface of the, just introductions of having us all in one place, we can truly start to address some of the oppressive, the unfair, and simply put, not necessarily progressive policies that are in place that affects us as African Americans within the working environments. One of the things for me, what redesigning workplace policies for Black success looks like is creating a workplace in which its focus is on progression and not perfection, as well as upward mobility within the company for those who want to stay for longer periods of time, and an overall educational environment to allow individuals who come to work at different organizations to learn as much as possible and pull as much as possible from these environments before their exit. Often when we occupy these high executive roles or these leadership positions, it's never really a true safe space or a truly safe environment for us to be our completely natural selves as employees. We always have to don a mask. We have to talk a certain way. We're held to standards that aren't necessarily applied throughout the entire company. And my vision of redesigning that is just creating a not only more tolerant workplace environment, but an environment that allows us to essentially take that stress off of our backs, take that monkey off of our shoulders. And that the biggest thing we have to worry about is our work product, what we're learning and how we're gaining experience in this industry.
Thank you, Jalen. And thank you, Dr. Grant. So when we talk about the current state of workplace policies for Black employees, one thing that comes to mind is the design and the policy gap. And we know that most of those workplace policies were developed with certain organizational leadership in mind, with predominantly white males, often without the consideration for diverse employees and their needs. What are your thoughts on the current state of workplace policies for Black employees? I'll start with you, Dr. Grant.
Yeah, when we look at redesigning, Bernard, we really have to kind of dig even deeper, right? And really think about some of the things that have gone so unchecked for so long to the point where they now feel normal, they feel natural. A lot of times, and I hate to use the word so much, we use redesign, but we have to be cautious because individuals will respond that if it's not broken, then don't fix it. And the only reason why we say it's not broken is because one, wasn't designed for us in the first place, so it continues to serve those for whom it was intended. And you mentioned that, Bernard, a while ago. Primarily, many of these policies were created around primarily white males, right? Not necessarily the Black employees. So it is important for us to really take a look at some of those policies. One, doesn't have to be broken. They were broken from the very beginning because they're perpetuating certain standards that continue to leave us behind, that continue to not honor Black professionals for their expertise and for their knowledge and for their skills. We continue to perpetuate policies that really just continue to preserve the comfort level of the majority of the people. And we do know the majority is not us, right? And it starts with, taking a look at just about every policy that an organization has. And when you do so, you have to make sure that equity is one of the benchmarks and one of the metrics against which you are measuring policy. We look at numbers all the time. We look at, who we're serving, but we're not really looking at it from an equity lens. Some of these policies start with the moment you even enter in a workplace. We are very quick to celebrate, all of the people that we've recruited. We have an onboarding policy that really is intended to set the culture or make sure you are indoctrinated in the culture of the organization, but really has not considered, like Jalen said earlier, your experiences, your background, your lived experiences. Onboarding policy that unfortunately sometimes the exclusion starts right there because you are really just indoctrinating into what you've already established to be truth. And it's not always truth for Black and brown professionals. So it's important for us to really take a look at, some of those things and make sure that even in our hiring, in our recruiting, we're looking at individuals who, for lack of a better word, would not necessarily fit, right? Because those are the things that we establish to continue to perpetuate these implicit biases, right? Even in a job description, you post a job description per policy. The job description is using words that you and I both know are code word for that's catered to the majority, right? So there are so many policies, and I'll pause for Jalen. We can talk about, and list them and go through them, but I'll pause for Jalen to share his input on that, and we can come back if I need to.
Sure. Jalen?
I would say over time, my answer about like redesigning policy has gone back and forth. Initially, when I started like my journey in governmental affairs, politics, and just the exploration of law and regulatory efforts as a whole, I kept looking at it from an organizational point of view. Like, what can the organization do better? What can the organization do better? But as I delve into the history of these different organizations, what are their primary purposes? What are their missions? What is the historical culture of these places that we work? I've shifted my point of view more to a individualistic, like the onus is on us kind of thing. We're in a very unique time period in which the economy is all over the place. We're dealing with a very, for lack of better words, rough federal administration. And we do understand how the metrics goes, like the federal money goes into the pockets of the public and private organizations, which helps stimulate different opportunities and different contracts for organizations. When you look at these policies and look at how things are as of today, you're pitting individuals up against multi-million and billion-dollar organizations. So in my new point of view, while I do believe in the redesigning of policy and making things more equitable for individuals that work there, I feel as though we as individuals can take our own reins of the situation. Let's study the history. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot. Let's figure out, how did this organization become what it is today? What is a potential projection of what this organization may be in the future? When we come in here, what is our primary objective? Not only as an employee, but as an individual. Okay, if I want to be someone who is an agent of change within this organization, I want to advocate for policy redesign. What am I willing to compromise and lose on that pursuit? Because great change usually comes at the hand of martyrdom. And it's not enough martyrs in today's world because of everything that's going on. Everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to compromise their job, their roles, their livelihood, their safety to make sure the next person is good. And if they do, it's far and few in between. So approaching it from a comprehensive strategy kind of view is how I would essentially start the redesign process. Figure out what you want as an individual. Figure out what benefits you as a whole, like what can help you pass along to the next person. And then we start to attack the system that way. We need a little bit more strategy in our approach. We need more historical learning. We need more historical experience. Those are the only ways in which we can kind of combat it. But as far as redesigning as a whole, I still think we're in a position in which it sounds nice to propose it, but the strategy isn't necessarily clear on how we can change those things if money is the galvanizer in the situation.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I think someone just put in the chat talking about being an advocate. So when we talk about being that change agent, are most people ready to step out and to be that advocate, to be that voice? Are we willing to take that chance to be that real change maker? What do you think, Dr. Grant?
You know what, Dylan, you're so right, because one, and I know you mentioned individuality, and we really have to tackle this we have to take it on. And while we have to take it on, it's important for society, right, to be on board with helping us take that on. We cannot continue we are the burden bearers of these issues, and we keep fighting a battle of our own. We need other people to step in the gap. Black people are not asking for handouts. We're asking to be, treated equally. We're asking for the same hand up that is being given to our white counterparts. We're asking to be recognized the same way that others are being recognized. And you are correct. It's important that leaders, and I saw it in the chat as well, somebody mentioned, leaders and individuals have to really be bold enough to do that. And I'm testament that sometimes the consequences can seem in the short term very dire when you do that. But we have to be bold enough also to stand up for ourselves. We have to be bold enough to, speak out. We have to be bold enough to change the policies. We have to be bold enough to really tackle it and ask all the right questions, all the questions that are going to make people uncomfortable, that are going to make individuals, really think about, their policies, their strategies, their actions. And of course, we can talk all we want, but let the conversation be driven by the data. Look at the information. You cannot go wrong when you are, assessing your organizational capacity or capabilities, outputs, and you're looking at the right data sets. You need to look at how many of your Black employees are getting the recognition or being promoted or, being acknowledged for the work that they do, or are they still being sidelined because they don't speak the same way, right? They don't have the same executive presence. Are they being sidelined because, as a Black woman, you're being accused of being too assertive or aggressive because, you speak out? As a Black male, you're too demanding or intimidating is what it comes out. There are certain conversations that just need to happen because compared to our white counterparts, it's okay that they're aggressive. It's okay that they're outspoken. It's okay that they're intimidating. But, so we have to be also, Jalen, to your point, we have to also own that, but it cannot just be on the backs of the people who are suffering from it, who are dealing with it. We do need allies and individuals who are willing to step out and to really be in a room, even when no Black person is in that room, and still speak up for the Black voice and still speak up for the Black person, right? So it is a systemic overhaul. It's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And it's unfortunate that it's in 2025, we're still dealing with this, right? And even more so now, we could go off on a tangent about, DEI and everything else. But looking beyond the surface, this is not just a conversation about diversity. It's not just a conversation about inclusion, because Black people can be at the table and still not have a voice. And that's the difference, right? You can still be at the table. Sometimes it's tokenism. We look at, okay, fine, we're there, but still no voice, no influence, no authority. And I think that is important for us to really center ourselves around as we look to really make changes and do the work.
Do you think it's also important that we try to identify the hidden barriers, because we see the hidden barriers that could be embedded in, let's say, the performance evaluations or the dress codes, or as you talked, Dr. Grant, the communication styles? Those kind of cultural norms are the ones that really disadvantage most Black professionals. But are we really keeping our eyes open for those hidden barriers? Jalen, what do
I,
you think?
I would say we're keeping our eyes open for those hidden barriers, but those hidden barriers are not being discussed enough at a
Mhm,
high enough level of leadership.
mhm,
A lot of the times when you first enter an organization, you have the entry level, you have the mid-level associate, you have the high executive, and then you get to the directorial level of any organization, whether it's a nonprofit, private entity, or it's a state government org. The issue is the uncomfortable conversations are not being had, number one, and then number two, the individuals who are experiencing these things are not being taken seriously at those high level in those discussions. It was beautiful to see around the early days of the pandemic in 2020, where we kind of had a huge boom in the Black revolution of like, this is not right. Our lives matter as well. Our disproportionate treatment is unacceptable, and we need to have equal footing in workplaces. And then you saw in mass organizations, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, different positions for Black leadership, more of a Black face within the workplace. But again, what happened as time went on, when the money and the, like Dr. Grant was saying, the individuals in these rooms who weren't necessarily speaking, even though they had a role at the table, when it came down to it, they chose money and economic stimulus over our well-being, and it's not right. And essentially, what I truly believe is that if we're going to go into these roles, if we're going to put this time and tenure into these organizations, and if we're going to give them our blood, sweat, and tears, we need to be also bold enough to have conversations at an executive level saying, hey, listen, this is what's happening to our people. And if it's going to continue like this, we either need to exit the organization or we have to have an extreme policy change because it's not right. But we can expose. A company, a business, a public agency is going to just say, oh, well, that's not us. It couldn't be us. Oh, we might notice it, we discourage it, but it still continues to be pervasive throughout the entire workforce.
Mm. Dr. Grant, same question to you. What are the hidden barriers and are we looking for?
Jalen mentioned some of them, and I go back to what I started out earlier talking about, even when we bring individuals on, job descriptions that talk about, fit and individuals who are well spoken. Well, what if I have a dialect? What if you're not paying attention to some of the things that are culturally innate to Black people, hidden barriers in policies. And one of the reasons why we saw the boom a few years ago, but then nothing happened is because the policies really didn't change and there were no accountability around the policy change. So while you have leadership saying, we're rewriting values and we're writing our mission statement, it sounds so great. And, we're having multicultural days at work. There was nothing deep, right? Jillian, you laugh. It's the truth, right? It's multicultural day. Bring your favorite meal and wear your colors. And it is so surface, the things that we focus on. And it's why it never stuck, because at the heart of the work, there was no true Black voice at the table. And also, we never really stopped to redesign policy. Remember earlier I said, the policies were not designed with us in mind in the first place.
Correct.
So if all we're doing is band-aiding policy or adding a sentence or adding a line, you're still not making it equity centric. You're not making it with Black people in mind as part of your deliverables. And as a result of that, the truth is the policies really stayed the same. And what we did was just kind of do the hype and the excitement and, everybody's Black power. And then it just fades because once, the drama goes away, all of a sudden we're back to what we're used to. There's no equity as part of individuals' evaluation tools. Leadership should be assessed on those things. A part of your metrics should be, let me see how you have improved equity or really tackle this issue of equity in the workplace and then in the organization. None of that is happening. It's not a part of a leadership assessment. So we continue to have these kinds of things, right? We never address issues of why individuals leave organization, why there are, the Black individuals leaving, they either get quit or they get chased out, or God forbid, they never ever get through the door in the first place, right? But we never really tackle why those things are happening. Many organizations do exit interviews, but you never see that publicized. You never see that published. You never see that, it just kind of sits on somebody's desk somewhere. And you know why? I've been in organizations where Black individuals were so underpaid. Salaries are another big area that we are often undercompensated. And, we talk about doing compensation studies, but what do you do with the data when you get it? You recognize that they're being underpaid, but what policy are you going to go back and change to make sure that even the individuals that you are serving and your staff is being paid at the rate that their white counterparts are? Those are the kinds of things in terms of policies that we really need to take a look at, and individuals really need to assess and not just talk about it, but we really have to do some implementation and then have an evaluation process at the end to make sure that it was not just talk, because the numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie.
Sure. No, great points. And, we talk about some of those policies, hiring practices, performance management, but one that we kind of received the harsher end on is the disciplinary action. And
Mhm.
some of the data that we see is that the study showed that certain Black employees will face harsher disciplinary measures than their white counterparts, and that there seems to be there's not a wellness and a work-life balance in that as well. So, can you both touch on that? What are your thoughts around the disciplinary actions that Black employees face?
Um, well, first and foremost, like you said, a lot of our counterparts were treated harsher under the scrutiny of policies of different organizations. What really needs to happen is kind of like at the I saw and mentioned in the chat, like at the C-suite executive level,
Mm-hmm.
more firings need to happen on their level when things are brought to their attention, especially being Black within the workplace. I know my own personal experience. We're often brought up to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
The rules are the golden gate to any way, the golden place to anywhere we want to go within a work organization. If you don't understand the rules, you don't understand the policies, you're not going to flourish. But then when you have our white counterparts, they're able to kind of finesse, get away with skirting some of the rules, fall short a little bit, but get shown grace. No, we need to start firing people. Okay, if I'm going to be held to the utmost scrutiny of this policy that you get to interpret in any way you choose to that benefits you, that's fine. With the redesign of the policy, we get rid of the gray areas. We get rid of the catch-all terms because we've all been at different jobs where it says and other duties as required. We get rid of those
Right.
gray areas. We make it very plain language, and then we
Mm-hmm.
start firing people. And when people start getting fired or you compromise their finances, that is the biggest aficionado of change. What happened with the Target boycott? Billions of dollars lost. They're seeing
Mm-hmm.
huge revenue hits. What happened when they started? It was a recent article that came out in the Washington Post where Harvard conducted a study on their ties to slavery. The individual that was conducting the research lost their job because we found too many slaves. We found too much Black disenfranchisement.
Wow.
When you take these known facts and you get rid of the fluff that organizations put in the policy to protect their own individuals, which is a form of nepotism, meaning friends of friends look out for each other, and any outsiders, you got to play by the rules. You get rid of that, you hold people to the fire and be like, listen, if you don't comply the same way in which you apply this rule to everyone else, your job should be up on the line as well. But that will require more of us as individuals, like Black people in the workplace. We now have to take on that. I mean, unfortunately, it's not fair that we had to take on that burden. But if we start from a foundational level and work our way up into these rooms and we're willing to be martyrs for the next generation, that's the only
Mm-hmm.
change is going to be infatuated. We have to be willing to make that sacrifice. I have to be willing to play the game to a certain extent so that my mentees and other students that I provide services to, counseling, coaching, they can go in and not have to deal with the same things that I had to deal with. I have to be at the table writing these rules. I have to be at the table giving the pushback. I have to be willing to put what I have on the line to make it better for the next person along.
Dr. Grant, your thoughts on that?
Agreed, agreed, agreed. We already know that, Black employees, the research shows it, Black employees report incidences of aggression or, racial bias way less than it really does happen because they're so afraid of the retaliation. They're so afraid that there's nobody above them that will actually really do due diligence in investigating. A lot of times they get dragged into these disciplinary conversations because of a communication style or we don't pay attention to things like that and they get accused of things that we do know that does not happen on the flip side. And you mentioned also this idea of workplace wellness. I'm going to use a very superficial example. We have been working with mindfulness, especially in the last couple of years, right? I thought about this. I was thinking, because this has happened. And especially when you're in environments where it's primarily Black individuals, low income, individuals who are marginalized in any kind of way. When you tell a Black person who has never seen the ocean to close their eyes and feel your feet through the sand and imagine the water, and they have no idea what that is, right? Because workplace wellness has become that for us. It has become, activities and events that really do not pay any attention to one, cultural competence. What is it that helps me to really de-stress? What do I need as part of wellness? It doesn't take into consideration the families that are now blended because especially based on socioeconomic status, it's a blended family, combined family, and so when it's time for maternity leaves or for things like that, it doesn't take into consideration that the family structure could look very different. Grandmas are the ones raising the children. It looks very different, and it's important for workplace policy to really think about those things. Why we have to be at the table when the policy is being redesigned. You can't design policy with me in mind if you have no idea what my needs are. You can't design policy with me in mind if you don't have any idea what my experiences are. You can't design policy with me in mind if you don't know what my trauma is. What do I need to be well? Right? Ask the question. Don't come tell me what it is that I need because you have designed policy for the masses without, and of course we know who the masses are, without consideration for the excluded categories of individuals who need people to pay attention to the things that truly, truly impact who they are, how they show up to work, and what they bring to the table without making an assumption that it's just that they're bad employees, right? You got to learn how to meet those needs and make sure that you are providing for individuals in every which way. Again, going back to the drawing board, we always say if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's not broke because it's working for white majority, right? That's why it's not broke. So we really have to just really be very deliberate about saying, no, we're looking at everything. But this time, because we're more enlightened, we're going to look at it starting from ground zero with alternate experiences in mind, the Black experience in mind.
No, that's great. I agree. So when we talk about effective strategies for policy redesign, um, centering on the Black voice, what are your thoughts on that, Jalen? How can we really hone in on the Black voice, folks understanding what their role is, what their maybe what their superpowers may be? What is it for them that's going to help them move the needle in this policy redesign game? What are your
Well,
thoughts?
in the policy redesign game, I'm gonna take it way, way back to elementary education. I love tech, I love mathematics, I love sciences, but reading and writing are at an all-time low. We have to get back to the foundational proposal writing, regulatory writing, and policy writing. We have to understand how to read these policies. We have to understand in what light are we reading these policies? Are we reading this in an individual, interpersonal way? Are we reading this in an organizational way? Are we reading this specifically to this industry? Let's say it's law, medicine, civic engagement. Once we get that foundation down, we then have to figure out what is our clear, direct messaging of what we want. And then after we figure out what the clear, direct messaging of what we want is, we have to now translate that into industry speak. And it's going to vary industry to industry, which is why you need these specialists. You need more Dr. Grants. You need more Jalen Sanders. You need more Associated Black Charities to help individuals translate their needs and wants across a broad spectrum of industries. Because if we don't do that, I could talk to an executive level white person, a CEO, all I want to my face turns blue about how I'm being discriminated against, how these different things are unfair. But one of the hardest things to prove in a discrimination claim or an alleged like racial situation is that the language does not transcribe. What I'm saying personally doesn't transcribe organizationally. And what do? They say, oh, there were no findings of racial disparities. There were no findings of discrimination. And like Dr. Grant was saying, it's so ingrained in the culture. It's right. It's like a dog whistle. It's right there. We can hear it. We know it exists. They see it painful, but nobody wants to do anything about it because it's just not. It's lost in translation. So we need stronger writers. We need stronger policy analysts. We need individuals that want to dedicate themselves to the craft to help people take what they're saying and put it on a larger scale and like a bigger level and a broader level. And then using plain language too, because a lot of these regulations and policies, they use they use old English, they use the King's language to confuse people, to allow for muddied interpretations within contracts and other things like that. Plain language translated to the industry, keep it simple. And I think that's where we can start to shine, but we have to get back to reading and writing.
Dr. Grant, same question around the strategies for policy
Mhm.
redesign and really using the Black
Well,
voice.
Dylan took it right. He took it right back to the beginning. Let's look at the policies all over again because they're so flawed in, of itself. We keep talking about that. So it's really kind of going right back to policy with equity in mind as one of your benchmarks.
Mhm.
Everything needs to be assessed against it. It's about putting your money where your mouth is. If you are not budgeting for equity in a meaningful way in your organization in terms of making sure your policies get rewritten, right people are brought to the table to help do the work, tapping
Mhm.
into Black voices, like I said, who can speak from lived experiences, then what you're doing is doing a disservice. You're just sort of doing it just to do it. But so it has to be codified within your budget as well. You have to put your money where your mouth is. And you have to have accountability standards for individuals who are charged with ensuring implementation. And that's where sometimes we fall short. So we expect it. And if you invest it, they said, you got to inspect what you expect. If that's what you expect, it's got to show up in places where, like Jalen said in the very beginning, people are getting fired because you just have not done what you are expected to do because this is the
Right.
culture, this is the expectation, this is what we are charging you to do. And it's not just a side conversation. Too often, this issue of equity is an add-on. It's not a priority to start with. It's an add-on. It's sort of if we
Mhm.
can get to it, right? So it's important that as a society, organizationally, and again, we need allies in this work. We need individuals that, believe in the Black voice, who want to honor Black talent, who want to honor people for their expertise and work, to be at the table, look at the policies, making sure that those policies are now being implemented and carried through in terms of the organizational day to day. You can write policy all day long and they can sit on shelves. They sit on
Right.
shelves and nothing becomes of them. But how are those really being executed and who's being held accountable for executing them? And when it doesn't happen, what are the consequences, right? What happens? Corrective. You have to get into a corrective space to be able to do this kind of work. And you got to put your money where your mouth is to make sure that this really does get moved forward.
So, for our leaders who are in position to actually make the changes and enforce policy reform, how can we begin to hold our leaders accountable to make these policy reforms? I'll stick with you, Dr. Grant.
Um, we got to audit everything. We just have to do the audit and we just got to be ready to tell some truths. It is so enlightening when a leader is bold enough to walk into a room and say, I know we sound good. I know what
Hmm.
our mission and our vision statement says.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
what we're promoting, the posts, and I know what we're promoting, but let's really look at what's truly happening surface level. So what
Hmm.
leaders can do is take ownership and responsibility, right? Black or white, might I say, for making sure that there's some truth telling and being okay with getting people into the uncomfortable spaces, into the uncomfortable conversation. Call it like it is, right? Does your board reflect your people you serve? Do your clients reflect who you say you want to serve? Are you putting the monies where you want to make improvements? Does your staff have what they need to be successful, especially if they're primarily a Black staff? These are some of the things that you can't DIY equity. You can't DIY it. So as a leader, you have to understand that this is a priority And this is not something that's an add-on or if we get to it, you have to be committed to ensuring that this is happening. And it has to go beyond diversity and it has to go beyond inclusion. Because again, that does not ensure voice, right? At the heart of what equity is, it does ensure that the voices are being represented in the right ways, not ways that are just going to codify us and make us feel like we're a part of, but where we're really impacting outcomes and where we're really creating opportunities for our employees, our Black employees, and our Black executives, and making sure that they're getting the same level of support and sponsorships that the others are getting, right? That other folks are getting, that they almost are entitled to. But we've got to work for it, work really hard for it. And I think leaders as a whole can really take on the charge to make sure they start, like where Jalen said, let's look at all the policies. Let's not assume it's not broken simply because we don't have a fallout, right? Let's look at the data. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at who's getting promoted. Let's look at who's getting raises. Let's look at, how many. Let's look at who we're serving. And leaders can really take an active role in making those decisions to at least begin the conversation or begin the work and move us in the right direction.
Jalen, your thoughts again on holding these leaders accountable, making sure that there's equity, transparency
Mhm.
in these policies?
Oh, I'm completely on the same page. I start doing these desk audits. Let's see what your true roles and responsibilities are. Let's see how you have managed those. What are the metrics? What is the data? Because people can argue feelings all day, but like Dr. Grant said earlier, when you point back to that data, now it starts getting a little scary. Now
Mm-hmm.
you can't excuse your way out of something because these things aren't, you're not meeting the metrics, you're not meeting the performance. I think another thing we need to do is as well, while I do promote Black leadership and I do promote strong executive roles for our people also have to have an honest conversation with ourselves, is that the game is not designed for us. So if we're going to
Mm-hmm.
enter into these realms, we're going to be agents of change. We have to be on our P's and Q's. Is it fair? Again, no, but we have never been held to the same standard, even in 400 years post-slavery. We've not been held to the same standard as our white counterparts. So if we're going to take on these positions and these roles, we have to create limited spaces in which they can attack us. So that means we have to be on our P's and Q's. If we're putting people on or giving opportunities to our kin and people of the same color, we have to make sure we're closing the gaps, we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, so that if they want to give us pushback, we refer back to the rules, we refer back to the data, we refer back to the metrics and say, hey, we're doing what we're supposed to do. What about you guys? And from there, the gap will start to widen itself. You
Mhm.
can't take away my education. You can't take away the technical skill sets that I have. You can't take away the projects that I've led, mastered, and brought to the company. You can't take away my innovation. What do you have other than somebody that put you in this room and you trying to misinterpret or misapply policy?
Hmm.
So start with the desk audits. Start with strong leaderships. Start with stronger leadership, clear boundaries of what your role is and whether or not you're meeting your metrics. And then after that, we go back to the disciplinary aspect. If you're not doing your job, you need to lose it. We've
Hmm.
all had terrible management, whether you had a bad boss at Burger King or whether you got your first office job and you have a micromanaging, overbearing boss that's really messing up the procedural processes. We have to
So let, oh,
always
I'm sorry, what was that last point, Jalen?
So we have to get back to the basics, and we got to stop creating room for other people outside of our culture to wiggle around and not suffer the same consequences that we suffer when we work 400 times harder than they do.
Hmm. Understood, understood. So let's shift gears. So let's ask this question. What roles do allyship play in organizations for sustaining change? Are we willing to work with our white counterparts and have them also champion the cause for policy reform?
Uh, I believe in my almost 15 years of like public and private experience, I hate to say it, we do need allyship, but we need allyship in a form that's digestible to the allies, not the form we best need it.
Mm.
It gets really, really dicey when you start having those true, genuine conversations with them about not only their active roles in racism and lack of diversity and inclusion from the workplace, but their passive roles as well. You guys get to interchange. Yeah, you might be friends with me. You might be a good colleague of mine. We might have developed a working interpersonal relationship through this job. But when you go to the other side of things, you step outside of the culture, you're not necessarily holding your counterparts accountable. You're in the room when they're saying these terrible, nasty, racist things about us, and you're just keeping quiet. You keeping quiet does not absolve you of your duty to speak up in that situation. But unfortunately, I don't think that we can overly rely on allyship. And if we do utilize that as a means or a way to, break through with the policy redesign, we have to give it to them in the way they best receive. It sounds messed up, but we kind of got to spoon feed racial lessons to them, spoon
Mm.
feed the history to them, give them the ABCs of why my mistreatment is not okay. Hey, if you don't want to do the big uncomfortable thing, but just speak up in this executive room and say, you guys are not treating everybody the same. Oh, you mind just like signing on to this proposal for me? And the proposal is kind of hilarious. I liken it to this. I say one of the greatest things Obama did was Medicaid because the way in which he wrote it, he got it passed. All like they were so against any and everything he did because they attached a black face to it. He wrote it in such a unique way. And not only did he get it in, but he benefited Americans everywhere, providing us with healthcare and other services funded by the state and federal governments. We now have to utilize those written skills to kind of talk over people's heads and then get our allies to sign on where it's not so controversial on its face, but it's effective in its impact. It's a very nuanced way to approach allyship. And I think we have to redefine that because we have so many allies when the stakes are low.
Mm.
And when you start talking about people's jobs, money, their
Right.
relationships, the lack of access to opportunities, I've seen many of people I've called an ally and the tone shifted. And it's my plight. I'm a black man. We're black
Mhm.
people. You don't have to wake up and deal with what we deal with. But if we're gonna utilize that avenue, we have to say it sucks, but we gotta give it to them in a way that they best receive it in order to utilize them as vehicles for change.
Mm. Hey, Dr. Grant, your thoughts on allyship?
Yeah, I think I concur, but I absolutely think we need it, It can't be just on our backs. We are the ones that are being impacted the most by this, and we have the heavy lift to
Mhm.
do, which
Mhm.
means we have to be bold also, and we have to confront all of that and make it uncomfortable for individuals to really be so comfortable doing what they do to the black face, right? But it's important also for allies to know we're not looking for saviors. We don't need any saviors. We're not looking for saviors. We're looking for individuals who want to walk along, be in the room even when we're not there and say, no, that's not right. This is not how this should go. We want people who are willing to sit in discomfort and help to carry this kind of load with us and help to open the doors like they do for their colleagues. We're looking for individuals who are, willing to really understand and tackle and be bold enough to do that because those consequences are less, right? Don't mistake the fact that white privilege exists. What you can say in a room, I can't say in a room. What you can say out loud, I can't say out loud. Or if I do say it out loud, there are going to be consequences. And we have to erase that. We have to erase that kind of culture, one for us, but at the same time, with the allies, yes, we need individuals to acknowledge us for our work, for performances, for what we bring to the table, and make sure that, these are things that are documented. I said it earlier. We're not looking for handouts. We're not looking for handouts. We're looking for
Mhm.
hands up like everybody else, right? We're looking
Mhm.
for our names to be called in a room when you know that that person deserves for their name to be called in a room. We're not looking to be given anything, for free because people are, like Jalen said, working 50 times harder working harder, and the metrics prove it. The metrics will show it. So this is not a conversation about just because you are Black. It's a conversation about honoring Blackness, honoring our experiences, honoring what we bring to the table, and know that any kind of policy or anything we do in the workplace need to consider us as a priority. And we ought to be able to walk into a room and not feel like we have to shrink ourselves to make other people feel comfortable. We don't, you know, we have to hold our tongue because what we have to say may seem offensive when really we're truth telling, or and being very respectful with it, by the way. But so you know, while I agree with Dylan, you know, working through the allyship is key. And you have to be very strategic because again, it's like going to war. It's like going to war. It's a very nuanced kind of battle. But I think absolutely it is necessary, and we cannot always be the ones carrying that on our back.
And we want to feel valued, supported, and empowered, especially when it comes to making a contribution or making a change. We want to feel that.
Valued, supported, and empowered. Voice. Voice. We're not tokens. You did not
Right.
hire the one person on the, you know, the C-suite just because you wanted to fill a quota. We're not quotas. We don't
Right.
want to be treated like quotas. We want to be treated as individuals and employees who are valued. You value what we bring. You value our history. You value our energies. You value our culture. You value us as people who can contribute just as meaningfully and in some cases even more, you know, to the table, and not penalize us, not
Mhm.
penalize us for the things that make us authentically who we are.
So, for the next couple of minutes that we have, let's talk about creating leadership pipelines, which kind of gives Black employees the opportunity to feel represented. What comes to mind when you think about leadership pipeline? I'll start with you, Jayla.
As far as leadership pipeline, I feel like, you know, sound like very repetitive, but we need clear written roles and clear written steps of career paths and opportunities. So, for example, I'm in government affairs. There's not necessarily any clear line to get to director of government affairs. I went from I went from working in Sky Zone to working in the mail clerk room to being an intern in the homicide department to being a law clerk on the gun trace task force for when they were doing like the corrupt officer cases in Baltimore City, to then doing a clerkship at the AG's office, to then becoming a lobbyist when I wanted to venture out on my own business wise, then a state legislative analyst to where I'm at now. That is so disjointed. And if these are, well, correction, my role is a very important role because I'm affecting the different citizens of Baltimore and other communities via transportation. We need a little bit more of a clear path to that. So let's say, okay, you start in as a state legislative analyst. Well, correction, you start in as an intern. From intern, you go to a policy analyst position. From a policy analyst position, you become a deputy. From a deputy position, you then become a director. If we clarify how we get to these paths and don't make it seem so fanciful or like, hey, someone recommended this to me. I mean, because usually that's how it happens. But if we created clearer boundary lines on how to get to these places, what experiences we need to have to get to these places, I think it would be a lot better to like cultivate the pipeline of leadership. However, however, we know our white counterparts and other individuals who may not be on the train of Black success operate. When you create too clear of a path, it takes away their opportunities to exploit the system that keeps us oppressed.
Mm.
Because now you can be a first year graduate out of college and you're a director to me, and I'm somebody who has 3 degrees, over 10 years plus of experience and industry knowledge. And now you essentially jump the entire curve and think you know everything and know what you're doing.
Sure, sure.
But that's what happens when you don't create clear paths to certain destinations.
Yeah.
Anybody and anyone can be a leader in whatever kind of leader they want to be when you don't have a clear line. So just further defining it via policy, creating a clear path, and then I think mentorship and internship programs have become my own personal feelings. Not saying that this actually is a real thing, but I personally feel like I'm noticing more and more of my students don't necessarily want to take on any of these lower level roles, which help build a strong foundation because it doesn't necessarily come with a large paycheck. When that is the best time to like get in there, make all the mistakes you possibly can make. Because once you get into these higher roles, a mistake will cost you your livelihood. So just more clear defined roles, more willingness to be involved in learning opportunities, not necessarily attached to a dollar sign. Granted, everybody's financial situation is different. I used to be broke. It's a real thing, struggling, trying to make it through school and pay your bills and somehow go to work and smile in front of everybody. But we still need those experiences to build the leaders of tomorrow. Can't keep skipping that process. And you need just like a clearly defined process as well.
You in agreement, Dr. Grant, with that?
I am, and removing the subjectivity from those promotion criteria. A lot of it is very subjective. And to your point, we all know networks are important. We all know that mentorships are important. But again, who's in that room calling Jalen's name and saying Jalen is qualified? Jalen has proven himself to be worthy of this, regardless of, some subjective criteria that typically really is designed to be a part of the norm. And as it relates to what we can do for ourselves, this is one of those areas that I think we can be strongest. How do we, as Black leaders in whatever pipeline, whatever industry, whatever system you're in, how can we be more intentional to really look out for each other in that sense? Again, not handouts, but we're creating opportunities for, Black individuals to be able to advance through, like Jalen said, creating the clear pathway, right? Career pathing. Here's what you need to do. Remove the subjectivity of those decisions. Remove the ambiguity from how, what you get there. Give us good feedback and not feedback that is just purely based on your impressions of me personally, right? We have to be intentional with connecting our younger leaders with affinity groups and, leadership development opportunities that we know will benefit them in moving them forward. So again, a lot of intentionality around it. And I think for those of us who are in positions of influence, of authority, of leadership, we can help to make those kinds of transitions and those kinds of opportunities available. And, working with folks to make sure that one, they see a clear path, and two, you are supporting, and really honoring people for what they bring to the table, not necessarily just who they are.
Well, I want to thank you both for this conversation. We could have gone for hours. I feel like it's just getting warm right now, but we definitely could have gone on for hours. I want to thank those who tuned in. Dr. Grant, Jalen, thank you so much. And on behalf of Associated Black Charities, I just want to say thank you. On behalf of Chrissy Thornton, thank you all. Please tune in next month for our Equity at Work session. We will touch on anti-racism at work, moving from awareness to accountability. So on behalf of Associated Black Charities, thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.